Stuff. So we are recording. Fantastic. So welcome everybody to this Ironman UK preparation webinar. My name is Coach Rob Wilby. This is Andy Heaps. We both work for a company called Team Oxygen Addicts, and we're professional triathlon coaches based here in the UK. Over the last 10, 12 years, we've prepared hundreds of athletes to take part in Ironman UK. Loads of our team athletes have taken part in it. Before being a full-time professional coach, I was a club coach down at Knutsford down the road, so it's relatively local to the Ironman UK course. And we have been on the course ourselves as coaches, but also as athletes. So we've both completed the dubious honour of getting ourselves across the line for Ironman UK as well. So we know what a few of you are in store for as well come race day, which is good. So we've got that covered from both an athlete and from a coaching perspective. As well as doing triathlon coaching, we also run a triathlon podcast. So if you're looking for more inspiration and you're looking for ways to find out more about the sport and get some coaching tips, every week on any of your podcast platforms, the Oxygen Addict podcast comes out, and we've got age group stories, professional stories, coaching tips, stuff that's basically going to help you out, get yourself prepared for Ironman along the way. So you can search for that in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts information from. Our aim for tonight is we want to get to the end of this session in an hour's time with you guys knowing exactly how you're going to create a training plan for yourself that's going to get you across the finish line for Ironman UK in great shape and really, really confident that you're totally prepared for this, but also in a way that complements your life rather than destroys your relationships, ruins you for work. We're going to try and work with your real life balance rather than working against that. So we don't coach professional athletes. We coach busy age groupers who are often professionals with families and full-time jobs and long hour jobs often. So our methodology of training is to find a way to help people do really well at Ironman, but to do it in a realistic way. So you won't be seeing any 30-hour training weeks tonight. If you are in that lucky position that you have that time available, you'll be able to adapt to what we say. But for most people, if we can find the time to train for an hour a day and we've got a bit longer at the weekends, then we're doing really well. So that's what we've based our methodology on. Like I said, we've been coaching athletes professionally for over 10 years. We've had hundreds of successful people cross the line at Ironman UK and hundreds of other races around the world as well. So we've got some expertise to back up the things that we're saying here as well. Our philosophy really is it's helping ordinary people do extraordinary things. So we want you to be able to complete your Ironman, but we want you to be able to do it in a way that complements rather than competes with the rest of your life. If you're self-coached, I'm going to give you a word of warning. Just be really careful where you're getting your information from, because everybody knows other athletes who've completed Ironmans, people have read books. Be careful of taking advice from people who don't have similar lives to you and advice from people who don't have the same sort of athletic background as you. So a great way to go here is to think, where can I find a source of quality information that's going to really help me and the kind of life and the kind of person that I am? Okay, so first things first, let's go through the basics of the challenge of an Ironman. All of you are facing the same event. You've got to swim 3.8K, you've got to ride 180K, you've got to run a full marathon, but that challenge isn't going to be equal for all of you in terms of the time it's going to take you. That's the first thing to accept. All of us come into this with different sporting backgrounds. Some might have been really good swimmers or bikers or runners in the past, and some might have no background whatsoever. So the first thing to say here is, depending on the background in your sport, there's going to be a difference for all of you. Our aim for all of you, though, is the same. We want you getting onto the run on race day with your fitness at the point that you can deliver what is a good run for you. What I hate seeing when we're supporting at Ironman UK is athletes who are really struggling when they get off the bike and they're forced to walk. And in some cases, people can walk it into the finish line, but it's very long and painful. I want you to get to the point where whatever your ability is as a runner, you can execute that run come race day. And that's going to be a combination of getting you really fit and also giving you the information to understand how to use your fitness so that you don't either blow yourself to bits on the swim or on the bike, and you can run really well. So again, to underline the challenge here, it's effectively like trying to do the London Marathon, but riding to the start line of the London Marathon from Bristol and getting yourself to Bristol by swimming from Wales across the Bristol Channel into Bristol. So I can see a few people smiling at the thought of that. It's okay, we've got your back, we can help you through all this. But this is just to say that what this is not is a swimming race or a biking race or even a running race. It is a long all-day exercise session where your success is going to be about how well you can manage your excitement for the first, let's say, 8 to 14 hours of the day, to be able to then use the fitness you've got to run effectively to the best of your ability. You're always going to hear stories of people who've gone far too hard in the swim or gone far too hard on the bike and don't then have the ability to run really well. I want you to have a pleasant and enjoyable experience as much as that is actually possible in an Ironman. Okay. Our guiding principle of our training today is going to be, we want you to do enough daily training so you fatigue and recover and so therefore get fitter, but without doing so much training on a daily basis that you can't recover effectively to train again the next day. So crucially, you need to be able to do that training week repeatedly for about 20 weeks. That's what we think is a ballpark figure for preparing for an Ironman. So again, it's about training and recovering, but not doing so much that you can't train and recover again the next day. Now, there are going to be periods in your training where you get more tired than other times, and then you're going to need a longer recovery time. That's okay. But in general, you want to be starting every day feeling, having trained the day before, but not so tired that you're not able to train effectively the next day. Again, all of this is to say, there are really no hero sessions in your Ironman training. It's all about day in, day out consistency so that you can put 20 weeks worth of training or thereabouts together and have a really consistent run. And that's what the athletes who come to us do. We help athletes stop making their own mistakes. We get them out of their own way and get them to focus on the important part of just getting the day in, day out training done every day. So let's talk a little bit about basic weekly structure of a really effective way to structure your Ironman training week. Like I've said, you're going to need about 20 weeks to focus on your Ironman training. And I think you've got somewhere in the region of, is it 24 weeks to UK at the moment? Yeah. So you've got a little bit of time extra to play with at the moment, which is good. Of those 20 weeks, the last 12 weeks are probably the most important. So think of it as like a block of 8 weeks preparing for the last 12 weeks when really we're going to be doing the bigger volumes of training. If you're already a triathlete training 4 to 6 times a week, you've got loads and loads of time here. If you don't already consider yourself to be a triathlete, if this is your first triathlon, if it's your first Ironman, if it's, you're not really sure how you ended up entering this when you woke up the morning after a big night and had an entry to Ironman UK, that's okay, but we're going to have to be really sensible in structuring your training along the way so that you don't get overtired, so you don't get ill, so you don't get injured along the way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we use a software package called Training Peaks to deliver training plans to our athletes. I'm going to use that because it's what we're most sort of familiar with, isn't it, really? So I'm just going to share my screen with you guys now. Let's have a look here. There we go. It'll take me a second to get this sorted. Is that sharing yet or not, mate?
Not yet. Might be the oh, it's the other one. It's desktop 2.
Yeah. It's not ideal. 2 secs, sorry. I need to just update the system. Oh. Okay, never mind. Ain't going to work, is it? I'll talk you through it instead of showing it you. Okay, so first things first, we're going to basically structure your week in terms of 3 rides a week, 3 runs a week, and between 1 and 3 swims a week, depending on your swimming background. And we'll come to the details of that a little bit more closely later on. We're also going to have appropriate strength and conditioning for you to support your swim, bike, and run. We'll talk a little bit more about what appropriate means later on. And most importantly, we're going to have a recovery focused day every week. And of all of those things I've just said, the recovery focused day is the most important thing. That'll either be a total rest day, or it might be a recovery swim or a short recovery ride. But for most people, a total rest day is what's most appropriate, especially if it's your first time. That's really going to let you shed all the fatigue that you've built up over the previous week and really hit the ground running. And then from the other sessions you've mentioned, our 3 runs, our 3 bikes, and our between 1 to 3 swims as well, we're going to break these down into what we describe as our core key sessions and our supporting sessions. Our key sessions are going to be 2 key bike sessions, 1 key run session, and 1 key swim session. And I want you to think of it that if on your worst week you can get those 4 sessions done, you're in a really good position to pick things up again for the next week. Obviously, I'd prefer you to have 3 runs, 3 swims done every week. But if that isn't going to be possible, fine, no problem. Try and get the 2 key bikes done, the key run and the key swim every week. Our supporting sessions on top of that, we'll have an extra bike session, we'll have 2 extra shorter run sessions, and we'll have an extra 1 or maybe 2 swim sessions. But in general, we'll start by structuring our week with our long run, our long ride, we'll call it a key swim for now, because we're not going to describe it as a long swim, and another interval session on the bike. And by building out a training week that's going to fit around your life, you're going to be able to repeat this week after week after week. And it's that consistency that's going to allow you success in the long term. Okay. Within that week, over the 20-week period we've got, we'll gradually lengthen the duration of our longest ride and our longest run. Do it in an appropriate way so there's no risk of illness and injury. But if we can do that, we've got plenty of time to extend those sessions so that even if you're starting from a point of, I don't know, let's say a 45-minute long run and an hour long ride, within 20 weeks, you can comfortably build up to get to the point where you can swim 3.8K, you can ride for 6 hours, and you can run for 3 hours. They're my kind of benchmarks where I want you to get to by the time your race day comes around, or a couple of weeks before race day, let's say. It's a 3.8K swim, however long that takes you, a 6-hour bike ride, and a 3-hour run. Now, an obvious question at this point is, but Coach Rob, my run's going to take me much longer than 3 hours. I'm not a pro triathlete. My bike ride is going to take me much longer than 6 hours. Even if that's the case, what we found is there's a kind of law of diminishing returns happens beyond that point, where if you ride for more than 6 hours, unless you're a very experienced cyclist, it just takes you too long to recover and be able to train meaningfully again a couple of days later. Same with the running, anywhere over, definitely 3 hours, but for some people, 2 hours 45, they can't recover well enough to be able to train again fast enough. And so there really isn't any point doing a really long run and then not being able to do any training whatsoever for the next week. So it's the idea of we do as much as we can, but only as much as we can recover from in order to be able to train again. Okay, so if we imagine a 4-week block in our basic weekly structure, we're going to gradually increase the duration over the first 3 weeks of the block. And then in that 4th week, we're going to make it an entirely recovery focused week. So it kind of goes like 3 steps, bit more volume, bit more volume, bit more volume. Then in that 4th week, I want you to do half the volume. So half the volume of the longest sessions you've done already. Take some sessions out if you need. Your entire focus in that recovery week is starting the next week ready to go again, so we can start increasing again. And that's one of the key mistakes that we see self-coach athletes make is it's very often, it's not the drive to do the training that's the challenge. It's almost the discipline to take that step back 1 week in every 4 and 1 day in every 7 to really lose the fatigue and get you to freshen up. And honestly, I can see a few of you making notes there. If the only thing that you remember from this is that the recovery from the training is as important as the training, then we've done a pretty good job here, haven't we?
Well, that's when your body absorbs and adapts to the training load, isn't it? And if you're not getting the appropriate rest and recovery, then you're not effectively using your training time.
It's 100% that. It's the fitness increase happens while you're resting, not while you're training. That's the thing to remind yourself of. If you're ever in 2 minds as to whether to train or whether to rest when you're really tired, tell yourself that it's that rest that's going to allow you to take a step forward in your fitness. Okay. So as you can probably tell, nothing we've described so far is any of the typical things you might see on YouTube. It's not about beasting yourself. It's not about smashing yourself into pieces. It's about doing this in as a compassionate way as you can to yourself. Training is going to be hard enough anyway, just getting the volume of it done without overly complicating it by trying to destroy yourself along the way. So above all else, remember your recovery. Okay. So as I said before, even if you're an athlete starting at a 45-minute run, your longest run is 45 minutes and your longest ride is an hour, you've got plenty of time to progress. I would imagine that most of you on this call are already a little bit further forward than that. And that's okay. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to accelerate you to the 6-hour ride and 3-hour run point and then have you repeat that week after week after week. That is going to be your biggest volume training week a couple of weeks out before the race. So if let's say your long run is 90 minutes at the moment and your long ride is 3 hours at the moment, that's a good place to be hanging out for your first 2 4-week blocks. And then that gives you a good place to build on. I think if you sit down with a pen and paper and you build out 20 weeks and you work out what the maths does to go forward by, let's say 15 minutes a week on your long run and 30 minutes a week on your long ride, that's what I consider to be a safe progression in order that you can, especially on the run, you can be pretty sure that you're not going to overstretch yourself and pick up any run niggles. With biking, it tends to be safer to take those bigger jumps a little bit faster. But I think if you give yourself enough time with 20 odd weeks to go to race day at the moment, the 15-minute steps up in the long run, the 30-minute steps up in the long ride, plenty of time to get there. And crucially, there's a few weeks built in there where, you know what, life is going to get in the way. You're going to have to go away for work, or you might pick up a bug, or training won't happen that weekend because of a wedding. So you've got some contingency built in there for that as well. Now, I mentioned before that the swim's focus is slightly different. We're not going to use that same principle of trying to gradually make your swim longer in swimming. Get yourself to the point where a swim session can be about an hour. That's if you go to a tri-club session, or you go down to your own sort of swim coaching. Once you're at the point where you can swim for about an hour, your focus is not initially going to be on learning to swim further and further and further and further. It's going to be on improving your technique so that you can cover the swim duration faster. And so for most athletes, I'm going to give you some ballpark figures here. If you are not comfortably swimming your 100 meters in about 2 minutes at the moment, you have got a lot to be gained by doing specific swim drills that are going to improve your technique and reduce your drag. If you can do that early doors rather than doing lots more swimming early doors, you're going to be practicing good technique and embedding good technique along the way. I want you to essentially get your technique good so you speed up early, and then we'll add duration and distance on top of that. If you are not very confident or strong swimmer at the moment and your technique is quite poor and you end up doing really, really long swims, all you're doing in those swim sessions, unfortunately, is embedding that incorrect technique. So we've got some swim drills we can give you that will really help you out. You can go down to a tri-club session and get one of the coaches there to have a look at your technique and give you some specific drills that will address whatever it is that you need to move forwards. But in general, like I said, if you're not swimming 2 minutes per 100 meters and you're fit enough to consider doing an Ironman at the moment, it's almost certain that there's a technique flaw holding you back rather than its lack of fitness slowing you down. Typically what we see here is really fit people from a running background come into swimming and they get really out of breath within the first 25 or 50 meters. And they're convinced it's because of lack of fitness, because that's how running feels, right? What usually happens is it's simply a problem with learning how to breathe out into the water, for example. And once an athlete's learned that feeling of breathlessness goes away. And all of a sudden they go from having to stop after 50 meters to being able to swim continually for maybe 500 meters. So getting that technique nailed early is really, really important. Okay, let's talk the specifics of your bike training then. We mentioned there were going to be 3 sessions a week. First one, we're going to focus on our biking first because biking is our biggest return on investment. Bike fitness is going to help improve your run fitness in a way that run fitness doesn't seem to impact on bike fitness. So our most important session is going to be our long aerobic steady ride. Aerobic just means you can chat with somebody as you're riding along. And all I care about there is that you're not going too hard. Don't get drawn into a race. Just go out and have a chat with your friend as you're riding, especially in the early days. Your second key session is going to be a hard focused interval session on the bike. It can be done indoors on a turbo trainer or a watt bike, the kind of thing that you might do at a good spin class where you have efforts of above Ironman intensity followed by breaks of between 1 to 5 minutes. So typically that might look like 10 minutes intensity at, let's say, zone 3 heart rate, or for those of you who are power meter users, 90% of FTP, with a 5-minute recovery, then another 10 minutes and a 5-minute recovery, and then another 10 minutes. The aim of that session is going to be to build your specific bike engine, make your engine bigger so that you'll travel faster for the same effort when you start riding outdoors. And that's really going to be the session that helps the longer session go by faster. Our third session, if you manage to get time for that in the week, especially for Ironman UK, which is a hilly course, we're going to look to develop some specific leg strength. So we're either going to be riding hills outdoors in the springtime, or we're going to be pushing a bigger gear than usual at a lower cadence than usual inside on our kicker, on our turbo trainer, on our watt bike. Again, you don't have to worry too much about heart rate there. You just want to be pushing a bigger gear than usual at a slower than usual cadence. So to put some numbers on that, just make it 20 revs a minute lower than your usual cadence. And that will really help you develop specific leg strength. And by that, I mean ability to push force to help you up the hills of Bolton. Our runs. We mentioned our 3 runs a week. Our key run is our long run. I'm going to give you our golden secret here for the long run. Break your long run up into a 9-minute run and a 1-minute walk. That 1-minute walk is going to be a game changer for how long you can run for, and you're not going to get sore after your long runs anymore. It really is almost magic. If you can run for an hour right now continually, I guarantee you can run for an hour 40 to 2 hours doing it as the 9-1 run walk method. And it's no more complicated than just taking a minute purposeful walk break every 10 minutes of running. Okay. I'll even have athletes do that on race day, because guess what? On the marathon, on race day, you're going to have to walk through the aid station to get yourself a drink or a gel anyway. So that is going to be how you do it on race day. There are no prizes for saying, I ran the whole way in the marathon. You are going to have to fuel on race day, so build it into your training. But that walk break in your key run is going to be essential as those long runs get longer, so that you don't get too overtired and you can train again the next week. The other 2 runs, dead simply, are going to be continual 30-minute runs initially, and then build those up to the point where you can run for between 45 minutes and an hour in the other runs. Okay. You'll notice the training plans I write, I split the long run and the long ride out in the week. So typically, if my long ride is on Sunday, I'll have the athletes do the long run on Thursday. And the idea there is, we don't want you doing the long run the day after the long ride, because the day after your long ride, you're really, really tired. We want to split it out. So to minimize injury risk, do your long run during the week. You get a couple of days of recovery of lighter training before doing your longer focused ride at the weekend. We will build in a specific weekend where you do the run after the ride at some point during your training plan. But for almost all the weeks of the training plan, keep those 2 separate, and that will help you bounce back from your long run and be fresh to go and do your long ride. Now, I've already mentioned the idea of swimming and why we're going to approach it the way we are. Even if you're capable right now of swimming, say, a mile, I want you to break that mile up into 16 times 100 meters, and just take a 5-second break after every 100 meters. Remember, the key here is we want you repeating good technique every length, every 100. What tends to happen is, and if you notice this yourself, if your splits gradually get slower as you get further into a long swim, what's happening is your technique is gradually falling apart. And the easy way around this is that 5-second break after every 100, it essentially makes it a long, perfect practice session rather than a long endurance session, if that makes sense. So again, if you are slower than 2 minutes per 100, almost certainly in the early days, we want you practicing technique rather than focusing on building your duration up. And then over the last 8 weeks of your plan, you'll have got yourself into a good technique, you'll be more confident, we can start increasing the length of your long swims, and in the last, say, 4 to 6 weeks before race day, you can even transfer those into open water, and then you're at the point of being able to do continual long runs and really back your fitness up at that point. Now, we talked a little about strength and conditioning earlier on and how that's going to support your training plan along the way. All I want you thinking about in strength and conditioning is it's about the conditioning to support your training plan. It's not about going in the gym, lifting weights and being stronger and bigger, okay? In this period of training, you have got the main focuses of your swim, bike and run. It's fine if you already do some kind of strength conditioning work, but make it light enough that it's still effective, but it doesn't leave you sore the next day. With all the athletes I coach, I get them doing body weight only exercises. So they're not lifting any weights. They're doing things that are going to be, for example, activating their glutes. Exercises like that are much more important and beneficial than doing bicep curls for an Ironman triathlete. So it's all about helping your body remain supple and injury-free along the way of your training plan. Okay? One last thing to mention for your training plan is to get in the habit of practicing your nutrition and your hydration as you will on race day. So a really quick rule of thumb, on race day, you're going to need somewhere in the region of 750 millilitres or standard bike bottle per hour of fluid. You're going to need about 1,000 milligrams of sodium in every 750 milligrams you drink. And you're going to need about 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilo body weight every hour. So for a guy like me, about 80 kilos, I'm going to need 80 grams of carbohydrate every hour that I'm exercising when I'm out on the bike course. And for every hour, I'm going to need a 750 bottle with about 1,000 milligrams of sodium in. Now, they're just benchmarks. If it's a hot day and you're a bigger athlete, you're going to need a bit more than that. If it's a cooler day and or you're a smaller athlete, you're going to need a bit less than that. So experiment and training and work out what works for you, but they're really good benchmarks. The key thing here is we want you to remember you are going to have to eat those calories all the way through. It's as much a feat of eating endurance as it is exercise endurance on race day. So get in the habit of doing that and do it from the start of your ride and from the start of your run. Don't leave it to 2 hours into your ride or 1.5 hours into your run. On race day, you're going to have to get used to eating and drinking. So do that as part of your thing there. That makes sense?
Yeah. Well, I see if I can just share the summary slide quickly.
See if you can share that. That'd be great. Yeah, if you can do that. Do I need to make you a co-host on here?
Let's see. Maybe not.
See how this does. Oh, brilliant.
Right. So this is essentially just a summary of everything we've talked about there, isn't it? It's looking at those 4 high priority key sessions. So they are if you get nothing else done in a week, but you manage to get these done, then actually you're in a pretty good place.
Fantastic.
So your endurance ride builds over time, your endurance run builds over time, swim, either technique or endurance, depending on sort of what your ability is at the moment, and then a more intensity specific interval ride. Then there's the medium priority sessions. We talked about brick runs yet?
We haven't mentioned brick runs, have we? And I think we'll just cover it really briefly by saying, leave them out of your training plan until the last 8 weeks. Have them start at about 15 minutes and just run after your long ride. And you only need to run long enough in the early days so that your mind accepts that although your legs feel horrible for the first few minutes off the bike, they'll start to feel normal after 5 minutes or so. Once you've got to the point where you go, oh, do you know what? My legs feel normal again now. Great. You can finish your brick run. And then gradually we'll build that brick run up from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. The longest I'll ever get an athlete to do is 45 minutes off the bike in training. And we'll combine that in a weekend much later on in the training plan. But for now, at this point, all you need to know is you don't need to be worrying about doing brick runs until roughly 8 weeks out before race day. So it's always a question, should I be doing brick runs now? The answer is no. Don't worry about them right now. Leave them till later on in your training plan.
I think it's worth just re-stressing that last point about recovery, and both in any given week and in every 4-week block. We cannot stress how important that point is, because the thing that's going to get you the best results on the day is your consistency in training between now and when you stood on that start line at Bolton. And recovery is the most important part of that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Good. Right. Next slide then.
Right. Let me just.
I think we've had some.
Yeah. So we thought we'd cover a few FAQs that often come up in these sorts of discussions. Probably a few of these are on your minds as well. So let's just fly through these quickly. I'm a good runner, so why would I want to walk every 10 minutes?
That's exactly what I said to my run coach when he first got me to do this. Remember, it's all about the big gift of this is it stops you being sore the next day after the workout. So if you can not be sore and train again the next day, that is a massive, massive win. I just implore everybody to try this situation out. Try the 9-1 run walk, see how it feels on a long run and see how not sore you feel the next day. It's an absolute game changer. And then similarly for race day, some kind of reset happens as you're walking for that minute and it allows you to just run for much, much longer, as well as breaking the run up mentally.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We've covered that second question already about duration of training.
Yeah.
So we'll skip ahead. Don't I need to be running faster to become a faster runner?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially from people who come from a run background. Will I lose all my speed as I do this? The key thing to take away from this is a good Ironman marathon performance for a good runner is within about 30 minutes of that open marathon time. So if you're watching this and you're a 3-hour marathon runner, a 3:30 marathon would be a really good result in your Ironman marathon. So it's not about running fast. If you're a 3-hour marathon runner, that 3:30 pace is 8 minutes a mile, and probably you've never run that slowly in training. So it's more about the duration, so more about the consistency of your training, building durability in your legs. If you can deliver a 3:30 marathon at Ironman UK, you'll be one of the fastest run splits of the day, but you don't need to be fast in running terms in order to do that. You need to be strong and durable, and that's going to come with frequency of training rather than fast running. And it's going to mean you've got no risk of injury.
And possibly the most common question we get for people who are doing usually their first Ironman is, should I enter a marathon?
Yeah, it's a really common question, and it kind of stands to reason that you'd want to have one in the bank before you do it. But you'll see from the way we've sketched out the training here, the focus is on your biking and improving your bike fitness. It's really hard to train for a marathon and improve the length of your bike rides at the same time. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it, and some athletes who are experienced do it successfully. But if it's your first time, I would advise you to just drop out of the marathon or defer it to the year after. Build your fitness up on the bike at the time of year when it's most appropriate to, and then do your marathon at the end of the season where you've got a whole ton of fitness in your body already. We've seen loads of examples of athletes who have a really strong autumn marathon off the base of all their aerobic training, haven't we, during the spring? You're kind of trying to serve two masters by trying to do a marathon in, typically it's the London Marathon or Manchester. Yeah. Do that in April, and then you've only got 8-10 weeks left to really focus on your biking. And often, honestly, running an open marathon, I think, is harder than running an Ironman marathon. It can leave you feeling so tired after it that the period of time where you want to be doing the really big volume training for Ironman, too tired to do anything.
Yeah, a lot of people feel like they need the psychological boost of having it in the bank. But what happens most of the time is they complete the marathon and they're so sore afterwards that it has the opposite effect, because then people are just thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do that after everything else? And it knocks you out of training for often 3 or 4 weeks, which is time you just can't afford to lose when you're preparing for an Ironman.
I think I've already covered the question on that, on why we don't train the day after a long bike ride. And then if you've got more time available for training, the first thing I would say is roll through a 4-week block first. Don't add more training in, take more recovery and make sure you're more recovered. You can always add a little bit more into the next block, but don't fall into that plan of thinking, well, there's a plan, I'll add as much as I can on top of that as well. Get what you've got in your plan done, get it done properly and recover from it properly before deciding that you can add a little bit more.
Yeah. Cool. Right. Shall we skip ahead to have a quick chat about some of the other things that we do for our athletes? Because we've had a lot of questions about these since we about this since we've started doing our work with Ironman. So
I guess the first thing to say is what we've done here is we've tried to set this up so you've got all the information that you need to coach yourself and design your training plan to go all the way through Ironman UK. And that's great. I encourage you to do that. We can do it for you. We can set your training plan out and we can coach you through to the event as well, obviously. So if you want to do that, there are a few things, I guess, that we can do that add value on top of getting a training plan and just getting some feedback on top of your training plan. And the main thing that we can add is our race ready system, which Andy's got up on the screen here. I'm going to hand over to Andy to talk about this briefly, because it's really he's the brainchild who's turned my coaching brain into a set of graphs that show you how you're progressing across time.
Yeah, and that is the crux of it. It's looking at your trend relative to your race, relative to the training that you've got scheduled, and having a good idea of where you're going to be come race day, knowing what your trajectory is. And we've analysed hundreds of thousands of data points across hundreds of athletes over many, many years who've all trained for Ironman. And we've got an extremely good idea of what it takes in terms of training and training consistency to perform well on the day. And essentially that is what is baked into our race ready system. It serves a few other purposes as well. It's a great motivational tool because athletes can see that, oh, I'm in amber, but I'm close to green, right? I know I need to push on for the next few weeks and really prioritize training. But it also helps when you have one of those weeks where things don't quite go to plan. It's very tempting to feel like everything's just gone to pot. You know, you've had a week of being ill or a week over Christmas, like you can see on this graph here. But what we're trying to do is show that in the grand scheme of things, yes, it's a slight blip, but that's all it is. It feels like a lot more in the moment, but we're here to say our experience and that of hundreds of other athletes tells us that you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. So all this is basically, it's a graphical representation. Our bar graphs here are showing how much of the training an athlete got completed in a given week. Our system sucks all the data out of the back end of training peaks, and it applies an algorithm to it that gives different scores to different sessions depending on what's most important. And then our blue trend line is showing how an athlete's fitness is increasing. I think a lot of people who use Whoop will recognize that.
Yeah.
And they get a score for each week and then a 12-week average score. And you can see that we say to athletes, look, if you can get yourself into the green area above the 80% consistency by race day, we guarantee you're in shape at this point to have the best race that you could possibly have. You don't have to be at 100%, and that's an important point. If you're above our 80% marker, you're there ready to have an awesome race. If you're in the amber band, you're still going to be able to complete your race, but you're just going to have to temper your expectations just a little bit. And if you're in the red, well, it's going to be preparation for a pretty tough day out there. Not saying you can't do it, but it's a really good way to show athletes what's happening and where they're going. The right-hand side of the graph is interesting because the red graphs are projecting into the future for the athlete that's on the screen. And it's showing what will happen in the future if our athlete completes their previous best week again and again and again over the next 6 weeks. So as well as showing what's happened, it's giving you a really good guide for, right, if I can hit some 70% weeks over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to be in the green and ready to go for race day. So it's something that just adds an extra little bit of A, motivation, and B, it's kind of like an arm around the shoulder to say to people,
yeah,
you're definitely going to be able to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, and having run this system for an entire season, the correlation between green race ready scores and exceptional performances is unbelievably high. So it means that athletes can go into their races if they're at or about the green level, knowing that they genuinely are in the best shape they possibly could be.
It's about removing the guesswork, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, I'll skip ahead of that. A little bit more from race ready, but we won't go through that now.
Now, we also have our athletes guided by heart rate variability. If you've never heard of heart rate variability, there's a really great app called HRV for Training you can download. And what this essentially tells you is, are you ready to train hard today? It's really simple. You put your finger on the back of the camera for a minute, it takes your heart rate and it looks at the minute variations between your heartbeats, and it can really accurately predict how much stress you're under and whether training today is going to be productive or not. Now, this isn't our app. You can download it yourself from the App Store. It's £10 and it's the best £10 you're ever going to spend. You take it every day, and all you need to know is, are you ready to train today or not? And if you're not, it's going to help you recover on the days that you really need to. We've seen game-changing changes in our athletes' long-term development by using HRV-guided training, because it's not about how you feel. You don't feel that you're under the stress a lot of the time. It's almost like an early warning system, isn't it? That stops you training too hard on those days when you're not ready for it. And it also gives you a bit of a G up on a day if you're feeling tired. If your HRV is fine, then crack on.
Yeah, so we incorporate this guidance into all of our training plans as well. So if you do have a day where it's not green, you know what to do about it.
100%. We also include meal plans with our athletes. So we've got training. So we've got meal plans here written by a guy called Al Murchison, who's written the book, The Performance Chef. He's a world champion duathlete and a Michelin-starred chef. He's seen my training plans and he has prepared meals to go alongside every day of the week. So all you have to do is load it up, buy the ingredients, prepare the meal. If you've got a recovery day, you're higher in protein. If it's the day before a big session, it's higher in carbs. It's all balanced alongside the week. So it's a bit like HelloFresh, but without the food being delivered. It's just the recipes, isn't it?
Yeah, and relative to your training as well.
Of course, yeah. And that's free included with our training plans. And then also we have our athlete community online. So this is where all our athletes can talk to us. It's basically like a non-Facebook version of a Facebook thread. So it isn't Facebook, there's no ads, but athletes can talk with each other. Athletes can talk with the coaches. We've got tons of resources in there that people can look at and can click forwards on to look at the next.
Yeah.
So all of the things we've prepared in the background around, there's a podcast there about fueling. There's an episode about COVID recovery. We've got all of our resources for our athletes all in one place within our app that they can just go to and get access to that.
And because we knew we'd get asked this, we wanted to give a quick update on where we're at in terms of athletes coming on board to Team Oxygen Addict. So you may have seen that's our usual price. It's our usual cost of training with us and being coached by us, $197 per month. As part of our collaboration with Ironman, we've ring-fenced a maximum of 10 places. This is specific for Ironman UK entrants. So we're going to offer 6 months of membership, so 6 months of coaching and all of the things that we've talked about before and a hell of a lot more for £797. And then we're going to add on 3 extra months to take you through to the end of this season effectively. So any other races that you've got planned this year, that'll probably cover you for that as well. And without going through all of the maths, it's basically a massive cost saving. It's less than half of the price, hence our need to limit it to 10 people, 10 Ironman UK entrants, I should specify.
Good stuff. So if you guys are interested in that, we'll follow up with an email afterwards and you can click the link and you can either sign up with us or you can book a call to chat, see if you'd be a good fit with us. But we'll follow up with an email with all those details now, because I want to make sure we've got time for the Q&A with you guys. Yeah. So
should we jump into that?
If you go into the questions, Andy, and then we can maybe see about getting some people unmuted and have some chats and answer some questions. I think we're going to end up, we've got 15 minutes left anyway, but we can.
So we've got a question from Chris about any tips on doing the hilly bike leg based on heart rate. Currently train indoors based on power, but don't have any heart rate data against power for outdoor rides.
Right, okay. I think the best advice that I can give you with this is Ironman UK's course is really difficult. It's really hilly. There's lots of, it's almost impossible, isn't it, to ride it in a kind of traditional keep your heart rate flat kind of way. So you're going to have to prepare for that in training. You're going to have to get out on your long ride, and you're going to have to ride hills, and you're going to have to try and watch what your heart rate does and try and stop it going as high as you can on the hills as much as you possibly can. It's almost like riding easy on the way up the hills, especially the steep stuff, so that you can kind of keep your effort level as steady as it could possibly be. Now, there's going to be some periods where your heart rate just drops when you're freewheeling downhill. There's lots of technical corners and sections on the course where you can't really use heart rate anyway, but it's more about trying to think, right, this is a really steep hill. What can I do in training to mitigate that? And the answer is train on the hills to get used to it, and prepare your bike as well as you can, so that you've got the biggest cassette on the back that you can possibly fit on there. Because essentially, I mean, I might be talking to the converted here, but some people might not know, the bigger the cassette is on the back of your bike, the easier you're going to be able to ride up the hill. And there's some of them that are not going to be easy, no matter how big your gears are, but the easier you can make it on yourself, the easier that's going to be. Have I covered the answer to that with that, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Martin said, Stephen said, I've already signed up to a marathon on April the 2nd. Should I still do it?
Is Martin, can you let me have a look. Stephen Hayes. I'll unmute Stephen and let's see if we can have a little chat with him, because that'll make it a bit more human, won't it? Stephen, I don't know whether you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you guys?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks, mate. So, Gwen, you've already entered a marathon, have you?
Yeah, Brighton on the 2nd of April. I thought it would be good prep, but just listening to you guys might not well be. I do have a running background. I've done marathons before, but not for quite a few years.
Okay. I guess the two things to bear in mind, I'm never going to say to somebody, don't do something. It's not as cut and dried as that, but especially someone like yourself with a running background, if you're going to do it, don't race it. Treat it like a catered long run, essentially. Practice your 9-1 run during it. Really treat it as though, okay, on Ironman UK race day, it's going to be a 4-hour marathon for me, or whatever your number is. I'm going to do it in that kind of time. That's the way I would approach it, rather than trying to run a flat out marathon. And that way, done slower than you're capable of, and with 9-1, you'll probably find doesn't take that long to recover from. You'll know yourself, the effort of doing a raced marathon is pretty brutal for a couple of weeks afterwards, isn't it?
Yeah.
So be honest with yourself and think, sketch your plan out. Here's the bike rides I need to fit in. Here's my strengths and weaknesses. What is going to be best for my long-term development for getting to Ironman UK? And it might be that Brighton Marathon fits in with that fine and you feel really confident. It might be that you think, do you know what, this would be so much better spent time doing bike training during this. So what are your current thoughts now with me having said that?
Yeah, I'm tempted to still go ahead and do it, but I was planning to do it more of a training run anyway, not really race for a time, just do a long, slow, steady training run.
Yeah. And like you say, as long as you do the marathon with Ironman UK in mind, I think that's going to be fine. I'm just going to always try and ease people away from try and hit the PB marathon in the spring and then the Ironman in the summer, you know?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thanks, guys. Really helpful.
No problem, mate.
Joe said, should you incorporate an Olympic or half distance into training?
Great question. Yeah, really good. So what we advise is, although you don't have to do this, doing a half Ironman 5 weeks or so before race day tends to work really well. It means you can have a week after that of recovery time, and you get a real good marker for where your fitness is, and you can practice all the racecraft along the way. And you know, the duration of it is long enough that you'll definitely know you've had a race, but you can recover from it within a week. It's really, really good. The Olympic distance stuff, I tend to err on the side of caution a bit more because it's so much shorter and so much more intense. the danger of picking up an awful lot of soreness from running really hard off the bike in an Olympic is the thing you want to avoid. If you've got the discipline to ease back the running, it's great practice to go out and actually do an event. You know, the racecraft part of it, I think, is really good. But just be really disciplined about not pushing yourself to the absolute limit on the run, because we want to be ready to train again within a few days of that event. Now, that being said, the half distance race 5 weeks out, I think if you're going to build that in, build in an entire week of recovery after it, and make sure you're prepared to feel pretty sore through to Wednesday or Thursday of that week. You'll be all right by the weekend, but you will definitely need that week of recovery. But yes, I think the half, or the 70.3, 5 weeks or so out from race day, certainly no closer than 4 weeks, will do you a good fitness bump on the way through to the event.
Gemma asks, is there any benefit to fasted training sessions?
No, I'm not a big fan of it at all, to be honest. I think the way to approach this is, there's very limited evidence to suggest the idea that to support the idea that you can influence whether your body is in inverted commas fat burning or not, depending on whether you've eaten or not before the event. Remember that your event, you're going to be eating all the way through it. And the thing that's most important in determining whether you help train your body to metabolize fat as you're training is actually how hard you go on the bike, rather than what you're eating anyway. So I'd always advise you to have the kind of breakfast that you'll have on race day. So something that's got plenty of carbohydrates in, and get your body used to processing that fuel as you train, rather than training fasted.
Martin says, do you prefer bike sessions to be heart rate or power based? My current sessions seem to have me at heart rate zone 1, but power zone 2.
Yeah, this is a great question, Martin.
Classic.
Yeah. The problem with it is there are about 7,000 different ways of working out heart rate zones, and they're all different, and none of them line up. So if heart rate is saying zone 1 and power zone 2, something's wrong with your heart rate zones. Not that's wrong with you, but something is wrong with the zones. Typically, it'll be that a Garmin has told you what zone that you're in. That tends to be the challenge. If you're a Training Peaks user, if you use Joe Friel's cycling heart rate zones and set it accurately relative to your functional threshold heart rate on the bike, they'll line up really nicely. But zone 1 power should be zone 1 heart rate, and so on up the chart. If you've got a power meter, use power as your main metric to train by. Looking at what your heart rate is doing is interesting, especially on the days when it's either higher or lower than you're expecting, but be guided by the power. So that's the most valuable metric that you've got. But for sure, check out what are you actually using to set your heart rate zones. And if you can use Joe Friel's zones from Training Peaks or his book, they'll line up pretty nicely with the power zones as well.
The thing to keep in mind with power and heart rate is power, you get the instant feedback. You push harder on the pedals, your power number goes up. There's always that lag with heart rate. So it's much more useful as a kind of lagging indicator rather than a leading indicator. So by all means, it's very useful to record it. But if you've got power, definitely use that over and above.
Yeah.
Right, where are we up to? Jake. So as a flatlander Ironman, should we switch the interval work to hill work?
That's a great question. Yeah. I think I'd be tempted. Those 3 sessions I talked about, keep that interval session as ideally an indoor trainer ride focused on hitting the specific power zones. But your other 2 rides, and especially your long ride, you're going to have to make use of the headwind to be your hills. That's how you're going to have to think of it. You're going to have to incorporate those big gear efforts that I talked about. Wherever you can find a headwind, drop the cadence down, drop the gears down into a couple of gears bigger than you would usually use, and push a bigger gear against lower cadence to get used to the idea of what pushing going up hills is going to feel like. It's also going to be in your interest, Jake, to get yourself to a place where you can practice doing some hilly up and down, not mountainous Alps type climbs, but relentless up and downs with corners and the bike handling aspect. That's going to be really important for Ironman UK. The more of that you can do, the better prepared you're going to be.
Yeah, and there's another really important point for everyone here, which is if you can schedule time to go and ride the course, do it.
Yeah.
So even if it's a bit of a pain logistically, it is well worth it. it's well worth it for any race, but particularly for Ironman UK, because it is technical, it is hilly, the road surfaces aren't great. Even just going around the loop once, you'll be in such a better position of knowing what is coming up come race day. So yeah, even if it means a weekend away, try and get it scheduled.
Yeah, good.
There's been a few questions about other HRV.
But just rewind a second to Taylor's question.
Oh right, yeah, sorry, I missed that one.
Taylor, can you unmute yourself and we'll have a chat about this, because I think it'll be important for other people to talk about this. I'll ask to unmute and hopefully, can you hear us, Taylor?
Yeah.
Hello there, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. It's been really good so far.
Thanks, mate, appreciate that. So your question's about sodium, is it?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of the stuff that I've been using at the moment, like the High Five energy carbohydrate drinks, it's quite low sodium compared to what you've suggested. Obviously just learning how to top that up to about 1,000 milligrams. And then the second part to that question was, how does that go on the course? You know, is it Gatorade, and do they have enough sodium in those drinks?
I'm gonna give, without giving any brand names here, there's if you listen to our podcast, you'll find we've got a great sponsor who do sodium sachets that you can mix in the drink, and it's not salt. This is the important thing. If you try and mix salt in with your water, it tastes, no surprise, it tastes really salty. And to try and get 1,000 milligrams of sodium as sodium chloride, be undrinkable. It'll taste like seawater. And most sports drinks on the market do have that 250 milligram level, and it isn't enough to kind of be isotonic with your blood, if you like. Especially the 1,000 milligrams is kind of a middling area. I've had my sweat tested and I'm closer to 2,000 milligrams a litre, which is insane. So it was a game changer for me to get the right amount of sodium in. But for most people, a normal sports drink is not going to give them enough sodium. So if you search the internet, there are companies that do salt tabs that you can take. They do salt mixes that you can go in. If you listen to our podcast, you'll be able to pick up the name of that sponsor, that they do these amazing sachets that you can mix in and are virtually tasteless in the drink. But I'd take control of that yourself, especially if you're a person who's had trouble with cramps in the past, and especially if it's a hot day. You're going to need to find a way to take care of your own sodium needs, because my experience racing was I just could not get enough sodium in from standard drinks that are available, and having the sodium from these new products can be a real game changer, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to be professional here and not mention brand names, aren't I?
And do you mix that out on the course as well? Would you mix that like once your bottles have sort of ran out on the bike?
Yeah, so you can take them out with you. The salt tabs can be really easy to carry, or salt sachets are really easy to carry. Something else that you can do is you can mix up a drink ahead of time that's, say, one bottle that's got extra sodium in and extra gels in, and it's got, you know, like more calories and more sodium in, and sip from that, and then pick other things up from the aid station. Now, I'm not sure exactly what products will be on the course this year, and typically, you know, things can change before race day anyway. So it's a good idea to be familiar with what is on the course and to try it before race day. Then you know if it works for you or not. And if not, you can then make a plan to carry your own stuff. But the nutrition, and for some people, the sodium angle can be an absolute finish or not finish situation. So it's definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, so a few questions about HRV and some other means of measuring HRV. We use HRV for training because we spent a lot of time researching this, and we spoke to the guys who created the app, and that's the one that two things. It's the one that we know the most about and we have the most confidence in. And secondly, it's the most accessible because everyone has a smartphone and it's simply just an app. So you don't need a Whoop band or a ring or a specific type of Garmin. If you have those and it does HRV and you're happy with kind of some of the intricacies of how those products work, great. Yeah, it'll broadly do the same thing, I think.
Yeah. I think that the thing we were told by when we looked into the research was the accuracy of measurement's really important. So Whoop and Aura measure accurately enough. Using the camera phone on the back of a smartphone works accurately enough. The Garmin HRV readings are not currently accurate enough that the people who made the HRV for Training app are happy that it's consistent and repeatable. So we just went with what they said, and we said, right, okay, we'll just use their app. And I love the way that the app traffic lights, green, amber, red for training or not. HRV in the Garmin form and in the Apple Watch, really interesting, but it's the feedback that you get alongside from the app that makes it really good. Apple Watch is another one, actually. The Apple Watch is clinically, I don't know what the phrase is, I can just suck my data from the Apple Watch straight into HRV for Training in the morning, and it's straight in there when I wake up, essentially. So if any of you have an Apple Watch, then that's one of the ones that works as well.
Yeah.
You want to go to this question here from Leanne?
Ah, yes. So with the course being so hilly, is it better to use a road bike over a TT bike? It's our favourite question.
The $1 million question. So it all comes down to how confident you are handling a TT bike. Most important is you get to the end of the bike course safely. And the road surface isn't great in places. It's very sharp corners and some steep descents. If you are a really confident, happy TT bike rider, by all means use your TT bike. If that's not you, if you're really nervous on your TT bike, you'll almost certainly be faster on your road bike on this course. Now, for an athlete like when we tested Andy a couple of seasons ago, really confident bike handler, you were, do you remember, 20 minutes faster over one lap on your TT bike?
Yeah.
So it was a significant distance for an athlete that's like front of the pack, essentially. If you are looking to safely to complete the event rather than qualify for Kona or Nice, you're going to be safer on the bike that you are most comfortable and confident on. But again, Andy's advice from earlier, if you can get out to the course and ride it, go and do that. That'll give you a really good lead to start off to see what you think.
Yeah. Weather is a consideration as well, because it can be somewhat unpredictable in Bolton, and being on some of those descents with on the aero bars with a deep rear wheel is a bit twitchy, to say the least.
And that's an issue right up until race day, isn't it? If the forecast looks terrible, then maybe most people are safer. I had tons of friends who didn't finish the year. It rained really heavily and it was really cold, simply through not even having the right clothes on. And these were really fast guys that just had no body fat and got really cold. So weather conditions on the day are really worth thinking about in the lead up to the race. Don't just kind of assume you'll be fine because it's race day. If it's forecast to be 8 degrees and belting down, you're likely not going to be able to just ride in your tri-suit. You'll have to have another plan.
Yeah, but all things being equal, there is almost no Ironman course in the world that isn't quicker on a TT bike.
Yeah, that's a real.
It's just there are other considerations to factor in.
What's that old quote? Almost always quicker if you live.
Right, where are we up to? I'm lost.
Mark Bidwell.
Any tips for wobbles in the swim? For no apparent reason, end up doubting myself and just doing out of character stop. Same happens when sharing a lane in the pool.
Let's get Mark on. Mark, do you want to unmute yourself and we'll have a little chat with you? Because I'm sure this is something that affects more people as well.
Yeah, hi
mate. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Getting a lot out of this. So thanks both for your time.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to it. This is my first Ironman. I think most people have a nemesis out of the 3 disciplines, and mine's swimming. So I've had several swimming coaches, and it started to click, which is a bit of an irony that even when I get to distances that there's like regular, just for no apparent reason, I just doubt myself and just stop. It's like it's almost like the second I think about it, sort of get into a natural flow. Again, it's not great, but I just get to somewhere where I'm comfortable, and then just something comes into my head and it's out of character for me. I don't have it in anything else in my life, but just have this kind of doubt and wobble. So I just wondered if anyone else has had it, or you or you've known of it.
100%. It's very, very common. It really is. And I'm so glad you've asked it, because like, firstly, well done. It takes a lot of guts to sort of say, you know, I sometimes have this challenge when I'm swimming. It is much more common than people are comfortable talking about very often. In terms of strategies for getting through this, I think what you'll have to do is gradually find a way to put yourself in situations where you can desensitize yourself to the worry almost. And you've mentioned in what you've written, if you're sharing a lane with someone and they're swimming close to you, is it a sensation of people being close to you that is the worry, or is it the being in open water or the murkiness?
No, it's not so much open water. It's. I think there might even be a bit of competitiveness in it as well. Like, it's if I'm not feeling like I need to keep up with someone or anything else, I've just found anything else, if I try harder, I generally do better. With swimming, I literally go backwards. So if someone's swimming near me and there's the thought that they're going to get, I don't know, I just clam up and just lose it. It's just crazy. It's and the same like when I get into a flow, like I actually think this is working, and then just for no apparent reason, I'm just do an out of character sort of spook and just freeze up. It's weird.
Okay. Do you swim with a club or a team or in a master session or something like that? Well, that's going to be my recommendation to you is going to be to track down a local tri club.
Yeah.
And see if you can go down and chat with the coach beforehand and tell them what's been going on. Get into a slower lane than you're capable of being in to give yourself some confidence. Just practice swimming amongst other people and see what effect it has. Because look, I was on pool deck for about 11 years, twice a week. You would see all manner of things that go on during a session that most of the participants don't know has happened. So most people are face down looking at the black line. Almost every session, somebody stops, stands up, gets out, has some kind of wobble, as you've described it. It's not working for them. I've had athletes who are literally front of the pack pros get out of the water because they're having a bad swim in their mind that day. I've had people in lane 4 who are learning to swim get out of the water because they're having a bad swim. So it's not something that just affects, any particular ability of swimmer. Everybody has these challenges at some time. So have a word with the coach and tell them what's been going on, and maybe just get used to this idea of swimming around other people and seeing how that affects you. Because I think getting desensitized to being around other people will be the first part of it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate your time.
All right, well, I hope that helps. Drop us a line if you want some other ideas as well. We'll see if we can help you out a bit.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Good.
Right, let's try and fly through some of these then. Alexander says, I'm abroad, I've worked trips abroad, so how do you suggest doing the long rides?
That's a question that's impossible to answer. If you're away and you haven't got access to a bike, it's all going to be about finding a way that you can balance. Have a look at your work diary, work out the times when you can get that key long ride done, and prioritize that. Even if it's not happening every week, if it's happening once every 2 weeks, to make sure you get that done when you possibly can. If while you're away, you can get in a hotel gym and you can do an hour long on a bike, well, that is much better than not doing any kind of ride at all. But there is going to be no excuse, or there's going to be nothing better for your preparation for Ironman UK than getting the full length of your long rides done. So you're going to have to prioritize getting them done at the times when you do have access to a bike.
Matt says, is it recommended to always be training in the TT position?
If you're going to ride a TT bike on race day, train in the TT position as much as you possibly can. Yeah.
Matthias says he's a breaststroker. He's just started learning freestyle. Is it a no-no to do the swim breaststroke?
The challenge with doing breaststroke in an Ironman around other people like this is people not expecting you to be doing breaststroke, and the action of the legs splaying out often kicks other people in the face when they're not expecting it. So I would encourage you to stick with learning your front crawl and try and do front crawl during the race. It's not to say you can't do a little bit of it along the way if you need to, but the perfect situation is going to be for you to be doing freestyle. You will get faster at it and more efficient, and you'll be able to go faster overall, but that's not going to come without training, I'm afraid.
Katrina says, any good sources of info for nutrition planning? have to prep as much as possible due to working full time and busy with kids and so on. Probably the best place to start is with the Performance Chef book.
Yeah, 100%. It's available on Amazon. It's not expensive, is it?
10 or 15 quid, something like that.
It's got tons of nutritious recipes in there, but they're all designed around meals to be eaten by athletes. There's main meals, lunches, breakfast, soups, snacks for out on the ride. Can't recommend it highly enough for the relative small amount.
Yeah, and that was the basis for all the meal planning that we include in our training plans as well. So yes, personally recommended.
Yeah.
Joe said, due to health issues, I had to stop training in December, only doing some gentle exercise. Any advice on how to adapt what you said? Still feel like I have good fitness and did a 70.3 at the end of September.
It's always really hard to give advice specific like this, Joe, without knowing the full details. And the first bit would be to get checked out by the doctor and get the okay to get back to training. Look first to just get yourself back into a regular routine. Build up gradually. Start with short sessions in the 20 to 30 minute range, and just be really aware of making sure you get enough recovery every week, that you are recovering enough to do a little bit more the week after. It might be that those health issues just fade away and are all fine, but without knowing the specifics, it's a really difficult one to answer. Drop us a line afterwards, help@oxygenaddict.com, and give me the full background, and I'll be able to give you a little bit more information there, even if it's simply get advice from the health professional.
And on a similar thread, Brian says he's had Achilles issues that just keep flaring up.
Get to see a professional as quickly as you possibly can. An Achilles issue is not going to clear up on its own, but it can clear up when treated by a good sports physio. So book in as soon as you possibly can, get that treatment done, do the exercises they're going to recommend. They're not going to be difficult or tiresome, but you have to do them regularly, and hopefully that will rehab it really quickly. But this goes for all injuries. Your first port of call has got to be go and see a good physio, get diagnosed what it is, follow the recommendations, because often it's not just rest it and it'll get better. You'll often get given strengthening or flexibility exercises that will mean this condition won't come back again in the future.
Jean said, what book do we need for the power rates?
So for looking at bike power and things like that, a really good book to get started with is Joe Friel's book. It's called something like Training and Racing with a Power Meter, and that'll give you more information than you could possibly imagine. I'll also give a little blow on our own trumpet here. We've got a couple of podcasts out called things like Preparing for Your First Ironman. If you just Google those, I go into much more detail about specific power levels for training for full distance races.
Kieran's asking about running power. So he's familiar with bike power, but now has running power on his watch.
I think what that's going to add to you is the effect of running uphill, the effect of running into a headwind against just using pace. So it's interesting extra information, but I don't think it's going to change your world necessarily. I think in terms of the Ironman UK course specifically, what might be interesting for you to know is if you're running 5-minute Ks on the flat and you try and run 5-minute Ks on the hill up past Queen's Park, how much extra power is that costing you, and how much power do you need to slow down so it's at the level of your flat 5K an hour pace? So that'll be interesting, but it doesn't have to get a lot more complicated than knowing that if you're running uphill, you're going to have to slow down a little bit to allow for the fact that you're going uphill.
Yeah. Tom says, how far out from race day should you try and ride the course? Probably as soon as possible, in line with your training.
Yeah, I would say if you can get up there, don't try and make it one of your key bike rides the first time you go for the course, because it's going to sound funny, this, but it's hard to train well whilst looking at a new course as well. You'll be wanting to stop and you'll be working out where you're going, and you probably get lost. So probably further away rather than closer to the event. 8 weeks out, 10 weeks out, 12 weeks out will probably be ideal. But I think it's very hard to do certainly a full distance 6-hour ride on the bike course, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I think, is that everything?
I think it might be actually. There's lots of people saying salt tabs were really useful to them, which is great to see. So taking care of your sodium, no matter what brand you use, is really, really important. As well as stopping cramps, it's also really good at making sure you stay hydrated, because it's more than just drinking water. It's having water with the right electrolyte concentration, and it's going to keep you hydrated. The app is HRV4 Training. Yeah, so HRV letters number 4 Training.
Ian's asking, when would you recommend to start tapering?
Great question. I would say 2 weeks out from race day is when all the hard work is done. So we're going to do another webinar probably 4 or 5 weeks out before Ironman UK, where we'll discuss the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks. And again, if you Google a podcast, we've got a podcast about how to prepare for the last 5 or 6 weeks before your race. The way we do this is 2 weeks out before race day, we do a big race simulation weekend where you'll do a full distance swim, either Friday evening or Saturday morning, a 6-hour ride followed by a 45-minute run on the Saturday, and then a 2-hour run on the Sunday. So you've almost covered a full Ironman over the weekend. It's your chance to practice race nutrition, wear your race clothes, ride your race bike, everything at that point. There's going to be no surprises for race day. After that, we advise 2 complete days off, and then light exercise all the way through to Ironman UK. So nothing more than about half an hour every day. But those 2 weeks, the key is, as you know already, it's recovery from the hard work that you've done. Shed all that fatigue. That 2-week taper will work magic, won't it?
Yeah. Awesome. Right. So we will send the replay out.
Absolutely.
Well, that will arrive in your inbox tomorrow, hopefully. So you'll be able to watch the replay of this should you wish.
Tell you what we can do as well. We can put a link into the YouTube channel and the podcast as well. So people who are asking where we find it. Basically, if you just Google this, Team Oxygen Addict podcast, you'll find them. Same on YouTube, but we'll put links in there.
Yeah. And we'll put links in to the 10 places that we've got for all you lovely Ironman UK races as well, the 10 spots in Team Oxygen Addict.
And let's also put a screenshot of the weekly training plan that I couldn't share.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because apologies for that, my new computer wouldn't let me share the screen, and we had a little bit of shenanigans going on. So we'll put that in the email as well, so you can see the kind of the plan of the weekly training plan that we talk through. And sometimes I think it's easier to see it than it is to talk it through, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, everybody, thanks very much for joining us. We wish you all the best with your training over the coming few months. We'll be doing another one of these sort of 5-6 weeks out, hopefully before race day, to help you really nail that last preparation period. Any questions you've got, you can send through to help@oxygenaddict.com. Hope we can convince you to become a podcast listener or YouTube viewer. And until then, be safe, train hard, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, enjoy everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
See ya.